The first podcast that I ever did with Rich, we didn't really know how to do the microphone setup or the video or literally anything. So it's just a shot basically up Richard's nose
Of
because
course.
he couldn't get the microphone far enough away from the camera to be able to truly get his face. Or maybe he was in some cubicle or something, but either way, the only vantage point that we have of it is coming straight up this way. It was bad. It was
But
bad.
yeah, hey, you do it a few times, you learn.
Will McTighe is joining us in studio. I'm absolutely stoked.
I'm stoked, dude.
It's our first in-person guest. It's the first person that I've actually ever talked to face-to-face when I'm not just locked in my computer box talking to Richard.
I love it. I'm glad I can be part of it.
Will is a good friend of mine. He is an ex-Goldman Sachs banker. He got his MBA from Stanford. He started a crypto company, started a bunch of different startups, and he's also one of the world's fastest growing LinkedIn influencers. So we're going to talk to him about all things content, really try to probe inside the psyche to figure out how's content made from first principles. We're stoked to have him here.
Delighted to be here.
Thanks for coming. Will.
Yeah, of course. Delighted to be here.
Richard, do you want to get us kicked off?
Well, the first question is really simple, Will. How did you end up in the States? How did you end up at Stanford? Tell us a little bit about your life story.
Yeah. So I grew up living in 11 houses in 7 years. So by the time I was 7 years old, I'd lived in 3 continents and just like a ton of different places. And it just made me want a little bit more than the town I ended up settling in, because when my parents split up when I was 7, moved to Birmingham in the UK and lived there until I was 18. But I just found that most people there were very happy continuing to live their lives there their whole life. They didn't really want to explore a ton, and I have no shade towards that. It just was not what I wanted. Like I wanted to travel, I wanted to see more of the world. I wanted to really have impact in some way. And, I laugh when I say that. I'm making a tool for LinkedIn creators. Not exactly changing the world, but
Well, you're changing somebody's world.
yeah, changing 600 and whatever entrepreneurs' lives a little bit. And then, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do in my life. So I did probably one of the broadest degrees possible, politics, philosophy, economics, because I wanted to hedge myself. And then I spent a few years at university and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just looked at what are the most competitive jobs you can get into. And I pointed my head towards banking, and I thought, okay, why not start here? And so I applied to a bunch of spring weeks or equivalent of summer internships, got a job at Goldman, went there, and then I thought finance might be it. And then I'd spent 5 years in the industry, and I was saying to Rich just before we got on, I had this clear path, which over 20 years would make me very wealthy, and where I would be a partner at this firm, and the people were great, but it just didn't feel right. And so I just had that feeling in my stomach. Is this really what you want to do the rest of your life? And one of the indicators to me that I think other people could take away is when I was asked by people, what is the work that you've done that you are proudest of? I'd done deals that were worth more than $1 billion, but I had the thing I was proudest of was building this stupid student society at my undergrad that helped a bunch of people get jobs. And it was pretty entrepreneurial. We had a team of a bunch of people. We were running a ton of events, and it was helping people. And that was the thing I was most proud of after 5 years in finance, which I think is just a good indicator that you're not doing something that you should be doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you feel like that's a useful question to systematize more broadly, to look up every year or two and say, looking back across the whole stretch of my history, what at this point am I the most proud of? And then try to optimize or maximize the amount of exposure that you have to that?
I certainly think it's part of it. I obviously like the Jeff Bezos approach of minimizing regret. I think that's a similar type of question. And yes, if I now look back on the last year, I'm wow, I'm really proud of what I've worked on. But prior to that, like when I worked in finance, like, yeah, the answer would have been something from when I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
Was there anyone in your life, Will, who kind of treaded this path for you already before, like had gone abroad and, pursued maybe a business venture or like study abroad before you, or you're the first in your family to take the plunge and, move across the pond, be far from family?
No one had started a company before in my family. My
Okay.
my mom is an artist and a teacher, and my dad is like a pretty successful businessman, but never in the like, but he'd never started a company, and so I think I'd always had an eye for America because my stepmom's American, and so I spent a bunch of time here, coming here for like Christmases, growing up. But
It's the best American holiday after all, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Exactly.
So you studied PPE back in the UK.
yeah. So PPE stands for philosophy, politics, and economics. But the reality is that I did 2 classes in politics in 3 years, and I basically just did mathematical economics with some ethics.
Yeah.
So it's really just like it's a very broad degree where you can just, if you don't know what you want to do with your life, you can just pick the stuff out that you end up being good at. And yeah, I always like the more mathematical side of stuff, for sure.
I feel like we have something similar where it's some combined hybrid. Like Stanford had STS, SimSys, which is like
MSCD probably
MSCD a little bit.
too.
Um,
Yeah.
Kind of like the
Yeah.
build your own major
Yeah.
of here's a broad swath of things that has a lot of different sub requirements that you can take to then conform to whatever standards are set out by the degree. But for the most part, you kind of build your own degree without having to go through the laborious process of literally doing your own degree.
Yeah.
How do you square? Because in the end, you have to choose your
Yeah.
major before you apply, and some schools in the States do too. But for
Yeah.
the most part, you kind of just go, and then the expectation is your freshman and sophomore year, unless you're pre-med, probably the one except for that rule, or like pre-law, pre-professional. You then discover what you're actually the most interested in. Like if you had gone through that pipeline in the States, do you think you would have spent more time exploring and then still led yourself to econ, or like would you have ended up going down a different route if you had the opportunity to survey more classes? Like, do you think you would
Yeah.
become a math major?
I think that it is the extracurricular aspects of the US environment that would probably have changed what I ended up doing. Because if I look at why did I go into finance, it was because everyone at my undergrad went into finance. And so I think at most universities, there is these like assumptions and undercurrents of what is the right thing to do after you graduate. And, at Stanford, you guys are better than me. Maybe it's start companies, maybe it's go work in tech. But what good and high status is just different everywhere. And yeah. So
And your peers determine so much of what you end up doing, right? Like I remember seeing Pierce taking these advanced CS classes and being like, crap, I gotta catch up, man.
And
This
well,
guy
and then he
fucking
did it.
did
Now he's getting a freaking PhD.
Oh, I don't have it yet, dude.
He's working. He's working.
Yeah.
He's working.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I'm working.
So I know that didn't answer your question about the actual subject, but I think it's broadly like, yeah, you're really influenced by your environment in what you end up doing. And in the UK, there's this just huge push toward finance, consulting, like professional services. And it's easy to like look back and wish what could have been different, but I do wish I'd been exposed to more entrepreneurship, because I think it would have taken me maybe 5 years to start my first company rather than 9 years after getting an inkling that is what I wanted to do.
It's really funny you mentioned having looked up the most profitable or successful career paths coming out of college. I actually know a guy, a friend of ours, who I'll keep nameless, who did that same exact thing when he was studying CS at Stanford. I guess what should I study to then unlock the best career? And at Stanford was obviously the CS program. And that's the only reason why he's CS now. And it turns out he's like very good at doing that.
I think I know who you're talking
Yeah.
about.
But the motivation was very much, what's going to be the best or like most lucrative career when I actually get out of school? And he kind of backpropped in that one. Talk to me about, I'm sure you got exposure to some element of entrepreneurship. You were both during undergrad society as well as when you were at Goldman. You've interested to get an MBA on top of that. Like, Can you
Yeah.
walk me through kind of the mental calculus?
Yeah. I mean, there's actually very little exposure at all to entrepreneurship when you work in finance at Goldman. Like,
That's surprising.
basically none. Because, like, what does exposure mean? Exposure basically means spending time with people who are doing the thing. Like, or that's like one definition of it. And as a junior person in finance, you get very little exposure to entrepreneurs. And if you do, like if you're in investing or VC, you get exposure to them in this really contrived scenario, which is when they're trying to fundraise.
Yeah.
And it doesn't actually give you a sense of like what it's like and the requirements of the job and whether you'd like it. I think it's really when you actually spend time with people in day to day who are doing it that, or just like you have a lot of aspirational like role models who are around. So in finance, I got very little exposure to it. But what was the other part of the question? Back when I was at undergrad?
I guess
Yeah.
obviously you made the choice to go to the MBA.
Oh, why did I do an MBA? Yeah. That was basically my ticket into America.
Interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
It was a ticket into America and a natural segue out of finance because like I didn't really have any friends who are entrepreneurs. I was working this job where you're working 70 to in really bad weeks, like maybe 90, maybe the occasional like 100-hour week. So you have like your blinkers are completely on. And I was just like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing in my life. And I'd done the GMAT when I was back in like 2014, just before I graduated undergrad, and you can use it for 5 years. So I was like, this is my Hail Mary.
Wow.
This is my last time I can use this, and I'm definitely dumber than when I was when I left undergrad, at least academically for sure. And so I used it. I applied to Harvard and Stanford, and I was lucky enough to get into Stanford. And I think I was like the only guy in finance from the UK who got in. So you're like,
Wow.
because it's one spot. Like, great, I'll take it.
Must have been a hell of a GMAT.
It wasn't low, yeah.
Okay, well, so you land in SFO, you go down to Stanford campus for the first time. Run me
And
through
it's
the thought
COVID.
process.
It's August
Oh,
2020.
COVID. Damn.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you went through this hard mode. I see. Gotcha. So did you move directly to Stanford,
Yeah,
or were you doing this abroad? Okay.
yeah. I moved.
So but regardless, what was your experience like that first month? If someone had asked you like, how do you like Stanford so far? What was your initial impression of Stanford?
I think what people in the US or maybe at Stanford maybe don't appreciate about it is it's just so unbelievably nice. Like it's an inspiring visual environment to be in. And that is just the first thing that makes you just think bigger. Like you see Bill Gates' name on a building or Jensen Huang's name. Like it makes you go, oh, like there are role models everywhere around here. And so I think the first thing, I just felt incredibly lucky to be in this amazingly beautiful environment. That was first thing. And the second thing was that, wow, all my classmates are really interesting people and have done really interesting stuff. And I immediately felt like I'm going to make great friends here, because one of my general views on friendship and some of the problems that you have when you make friends really early in life is that, or at least that I had, is that you become friends based on things that become less important as you get older. So for example, at high school, you become friends with people because they're around. Like that's not really a good indicator of friendship when you're 28.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you meet people at 20, I think I was maybe 27 when I arrived. When you meet people that age, you have a more fully formed view of what you want out of life. And if you open up the headspace to making friends at that age, which is very uncommon because everyone's just so busy with their own lives, you can find people who are really aligned with what you want out of life and what you will want for the next 10, 15, maybe 20 years. So that was just something that was fantastic about the experience.
Plus, you met your wife. So
I met my wife. Yeah, I met my wife, and I'm married.
Oh.
So, but that was not in the first
Should have
month.
led with that, Will.
That was not in the first
day
month.
one, he says, "This is my real card to America."
Yeah.
So you were at the GSB for 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. It's a 2-year program. During COVID must have been like a pretty funky experience because I always have this conception of the GSB in particular playing Beer Die on the ones. Such an iconic visual during undergrad where we would be stressed out of our mind. Or even biking. I think there was one time I was biking to a final and I just passed some lawn of people at the GSB who are tossing dice, playing some beer games. And I'm thinking, God, grad school must be so nice,
I know these people are aspirational.
They were I and I'm sure COVID changed that experience a little bit. We're like, do you got more academic when you were there during COVID by
Way less.
necessity?
Way less. No, way less because all classes became virtual. And so just no one paid attention. Like it just became an absolute joke. It like business school in general, at least Stanford, is not a particularly academic place in just in the first place.
You're trying to network.
You're basically trying to network, and there's probably a few specific because there's this tension, right? Like you have the academics who are professors of business who typically teach very out of date content, like marketing classes. There's nothing on social media marketing. It's all like old school. Here's Porter's 5 forces. Nothing on here's how you create an ad. Like here's something practical and useful. So it's not. But there are practitioners, like for example Andy Ratcliffe. Yeah, Andy Ratcliffe teaches a class on how to find product market fit that is like highly desirable. And there are definitely some like that, but it's not. You don't go in there being like, yes, I'm going to learn about accounting, and that's going to be like the most useful life skill ever, on average. And then the fact that it's all virtual, no one's paying attention.
Yeah. Then you're really there for the networking.
Yeah. And then there's probably a couple classes that you think, this is going to be super related to what I wanted to offer. It's like, there was a CS crypto class I did that I was like, wow, okay, yeah, this is going to be related. This is potentially something I want to do afterwards, so I'm going to pay attention here.
So double click on that. You're doing the GSB. You want to be an entrepreneur. You want to stay in the US.
Yeah.
I feel like the portrait is emerging of what you're going to end up doing next. But like, how did you end up deciding that of all of the opportunities that you could do after the GSB, both joining someone else, early employee, like first business owner, starting your own company, and then whittling it down to I want to start a company in crypto.
Yeah.
And this was also circa 2021.
Yeah, it's 21.
So this is already a little bit after the Bitcoin bubble, I guess, right? Well,
yeah,
this must have been folks had known about this now for like what, 5 years, maybe 5-6 years.
Yes, folks had known about it for 5 or 6 years. So I basically spent the summer of in between first year and second year trying to find business ideas, and I spent a bunch of time poking around climate. And then eventually I got onto crypto, and I just found it to be this like black hole of learning that I was just like fascinated by. And then I can't remember what my initial thesis was actually now, but it ended up being wrong. And so after graduating, I spent a year and a half building in crypto. And I think my biggest learning from that was that picking the right market is the most important decision that you can make. Because before that, I'd worked in a brute force industry. Finance, you just brute force things. And academically, it's like, I don't think I've ever been the smartest person in the world. I just brute force things. And then I picked crypto. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to brute force this. But I basically went into a market where we were building a basically like B2B SaaS product. And what I realized was that the companies we were selling to were scrounging for $500,000 a month contracts. Companies we were selling to were like, yes, I need this. But they didn't have any money because they weren't making any money. And and there's this big disconnect in crypto between like market value and economic value. So you basically have companies that are trading at really high market values, like all these like layer ones, like Ethereum, Solana, and then other projects that make them very attractive investments for investors if you have a tokenized offering, basically if you have a token, versus who's actually making money. And there's very few businesses that are actually making money. And that is fundamentally the problem with the industry right now, is that there are not really end use cases that are supporting the markets apart from trading. And now we have
So
stable points.
you were brute forcing things before. You were just creating a product without there being an actual market, but that kind of worked. Is that what you're saying? But
It was just thinking that I could overcome the market.
I see.
It'd be like,
Okay.
yeah, I will be the person that figures this thing out in this market. And that was just very blasé. And you can't create a market it's very hard to create a market that's not already there.
Yeah, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I also feel like it's maybe a question of risk appetite too, on some level, where the great thing about being in the Valley where there are a lot of startups is usually those startups are pretty willing to buy software from other startups because they get it. They don't have an established stack, so they're adopting something that's new instead of having to rip out something that's old. That's already playing to your advantage as a startup company. But then they also just have a higher risk appetite. Whereas, if there are companies in the space, but they're not making any money, or they're companies in the space, but they're huge conglomerate organizations, like existing banks that are trying to adopt crypto, then I imagine getting in with them and trying to establish a pipeline is going to be a lot harder than just selling to other companies that are actually profitable themselves.
Yeah, completely. And I mean, I'm simplifying it, right? But like, we made every startup mistake, but like, we didn't talk to customers initially, and then spent 3 months building something they didn't want, and then we did talk to customers, built something they did want, but then didn't make it sticky enough, and it was more one-off value than recurring, and all the mistakes. But it was a very painful year and a half. I developed insomnia, which was just unbelievably shit. Would not recommend. Yeah, exactly.
Try to avoid it.
Overrated.
Yeah, overrated. But definitely there was learning in that, and it was really the low moment at the end of that when I was trying to figure out what do I do next that took me to where I am now. And obviously, this world is a lot more interesting than the last one.
So to me, something that's interesting about your life story, Will, is that you were kind of at this low moment, like this nadir kind of your career trajectory. And that's when you started creating your own personal brand, right? It's almost like when you felt, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you kind of felt like you were at maybe a low point in your life, that's when you started to invest in your own personal brand. Tell me, in some sense, I would almost think like you would want to create a personal brand when you're at your highest, because you have the most to sell at that point. So tell me a little bit about your thought process. Like, what inspired you to want to start, your personal brand journey at that point?
Yeah. So I think one thing that I saw in crypto was that, our tool was basically a marketing lead gen product, and we had a competitor. That competitor had 400,000 followers on Twitter, and he just basically walked into any meeting that he wanted. And whereas I was there scrounging through Telegram DMs, showing up at people's booths at conferences, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was just an uphill battle. And so I'd seen, okay, this guy has written a book. It's Antonio Garcia Martinez. He wrote Chaos Monkeys or something, like a famous Silicon Valley book, but not related at all to crypto. And with that, he walked into basically any meeting that he wanted. So I was there thinking, well, this thing is helpful. And then I'd seen a guy from my university called Chris Donnelly build a huge personal brand that was opening doors for him. And being at a low moment meant that I had time to reflect and look at different options. And I remember just posting my first LinkedIn post, and it was about how to learn Spanish faster. And it got 50K views from something that was not that good in my opinion. And I was like, maybe there's an attention arbitrage opportunity here on LinkedIn. And then with that, I just started posting. And at the same time, I was still working at a VC-backed company. So I was looking for new ideas and trying to find a way to have an advantage in executing on those new ideas. So, I was thinking about software for chemical distributors and US defense. So I was thinking, where do those people hang out? Well, if they hang out anywhere, it's going to be LinkedIn or old school Facebook. So I just started posting on LinkedIn, thinking that when I do outbound to these people, because they see I'm posting regularly and I have some presence, they're more likely to accept and start talking to me, which was true. But I also realized that was not the best use of time as I was posting more.
Wow.
I remember this one. Yeah, Rich.
No, go for it, Pierce.
I remember this one story from the early days of you doing this, where you sent me a screenshot of you having made it. You were front page on Reddit. But the only problem, it was r/LinkedIn lunatics. I think it's posted about like Elon Musk or something. Don't exactly remember what it was. But, in that moment, I thought, wow, like you're getting raked over the coals by these random people. Probably some people in there combined with like some bots that's spreading this content. Like, how did you develop the thick skin or the ability to laugh that off in some way?
Yeah.
And I guess maybe zooming it out, not to that specific instance, it feels like personal branding is so interesting because you actually are selling yourself in a way that if you are the CMO for some company and the company's not doing that well or the ads aren't performing, it's not like you are filleting yourself out in the marketplace. It's just the company doesn't want it. There might be a host full of reasons why, but you actually are putting yourself out there as a one-to-one relationship. Like, how do you see all that?
I just have a point to prove to the universe in general. And I think if you compare that with, I had just spent the prior year and a half chewing glass on a company that didn't work. There was very little that I could be ashamed of. Like, I just spent a year and a half building something that hadn't worked. Like 5 things that hadn't worked. One that had marginally worked. And so I was just like, I don't care. Like, I just
Yeah, you got nothing.
I have nothing to lose. I have no shame whatsoever, because that implies that I have done something interesting in the first place. So I remember I had some, and particularly if it's randoms, like random people. I did have a few instances of people who I knew who got back to me, were like
Talking shit.
Like, there was a few people from Stanford. Like, one person said, "Oh, I think we need to do an intervention on Will. Like, what the fuck is he doing?" Another person who described my content as infumable, which is like intolerable in Spanish. And I was just like, at this point, I was like, well, I'm going to show them. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, it worked, right? I mean,
Yeah.
For all the haters, you have 10 times as many followers, obviously.
If not way,
way more.
Yeah.
100,000 maybe. Yeah. I mean, that's incredible.
I also think that fundamentally, to build a successful brand, you cannot be mainstream. You have to have some differentiated takes, and that, by having differentiated takes, means that people will disagree with you. I remember on social media, there's not really room for nuance. You can't include all the asterisks and caveats that you put in your thesis, right? Like, you don't have people's attention for long enough to do that. So you end up saying things that are polarizing, and that just means people won't like you. Some people won't like you, but those people were never going to buy from you in the first place. And
because another thing that you post a lot about is being authentic to your true self, right, Will? And so I feel like, how do you square these two things, where on the one hand you need to be polarizing, but on the other, maybe if you're not necessarily a very like contrarian person to begin with, how do these two things like mesh together? How can you be authentic but also sort of a little bit contentious or polarizing?
I think that people are generally very bad at identifying their contrarian opinions. And, like, for example, I know that Sequoia has this question that they asked founders, which is, what is the one thing that you believe that your 5 smartest friends disagree with? It's incredibly hard on the spot to come up with something to answer that question. I've sat there and been like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But what about writing down the 10 most conventional beliefs in AI, and then looking at that list and going, which of those do I disagree with about what the future is going to look like? Probably not that hard. There's probably 3 or 4 of them. And particularly if you're building a company, because if you're building a startup, you are by definition think the world is going to look slightly different to how it looks right now. And you have a point of view on that. So if you are building a company, it's actually very easy to find your contrarian opinions. And
That's interesting. It's like every company is almost a contrarian idea, right?
it
To a
is,
certain extent, because it goes against the status quo. Yeah.
particularly every newer company.
Hmm.
And yeah, that said, you don't want to be totally crazy, because what are you trying to do? You're trying to influence people. I also have a separate point I want to make on being authentic,
Please.
which is that social media is it's a facet of you. It's like, you know how you show up to work. How I show up to work is not the same that I show up to my wife. Yes, there is like a common thread between them, but the version of you that turns up emphasizes different things. And like, posting on social media is a job. Like, it's not a diary. And I think that's where people get confused. They think that they should be posting about what they did this weekend, or what their interests are. And like, that's not the point. The point is that you are building a version of you online, which is authentic, because the parts you show are connected and are true about and show up in other aspects of your life, but it's not all of you.
It's kind of interesting to me that we use the phrase social media as this really blanket term to mean literally every social network that's out there that has network effects. And they all, in some ways, have kind of converged to the thing.
Yeah.
Like, you can post images on all of them. You can post text on all of them. You can post whatever. Maybe Snapchat's the only one that has disappearing messages, but I think Instagram has
Yeah.
something that's kind of related to. Whereas in reality, they actually are kind of different instruments. It's like,
Very.
if you're posting on Instagram, there's both the individual side of Instagram of, I'm trying to see what my friends are more or less actually up
Yeah.
to. Like, I'm not trying to cultivate a persona that my life is perfect on Instagram. People that actually follow me on
Yeah.
Instagram recognize the many flaws that are in my life and like want to share the flaws that are in theirs. And LinkedIn is a platform that's like very much just a social, or just a selling tool,
Yeah.
maybe kind of under this like social selling.
Yeah.
X is kind of somewhere in the middle, where some
Yeah.
people are on there just to roast other people, some people
Yeah.
are on there to sell, some people are on there to share research. And like, by just trying to lump them all together, I think in some ways maybe we lose that, where
Yeah.
the messaging that we get of social media is you're actually trying to show up in your personal life.
Yeah.
Whereas you're making the point of, no, actually, when it's your job to post on social media,
Yeah.
it's about cultivating a persona, because this is work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something else you touched on that's really important is the context of the viewer. Like, when people go on Instagram, they are looking for brain food. Like, it's often the evening. They are tired, or maybe they've been working for a couple hours and they just want a break. And so they're thinking from a leisure perspective. Whereas when people go on LinkedIn, they're typically not thinking about, like, what are they going to do this weekend, and finding the answer on LinkedIn. And same as, like, what is the context people go on X? It's that they're often looking for news, or maybe that they are some like bleeding edge thoughts on tech are going to be on there. And so you're right. It's just like the context with which the viewers have and are going into using a platform is so important for many things, particularly if you're selling.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to optimize towards it.
One interesting thing, Will, that I've noticed is that amongst PhD friends, no one really uses LinkedIn, but everyone insists on using Twitter or
Yeah.
X, right? And it's just interesting that this niche community, has siloed itself into this one specific platform. What as a content creator would you advise myself or my other PhD friends? Do you think it makes sense to silo yourself and really just target this niche community, if you are within this little, bubble? Or do you think it always makes sense to sort of try to broaden your horizon across LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, whatever?
My first question would be like, what is the goal?
Yeah, I guess broadly it is to share your research, I think, for the PhD students.
Okay. Well, then the way I would think about that question is, okay, where do the people who would who basically who I want, where are my target audience living? Like, is that other researchers? If so, where do they hang out? If they're already on Twitter, then that's probably just the place to post. So I always think about it in terms of what's the goal, and then where do those people live? And then the second part is just every platform has its own dynamic and culture, basically. So you see jokes about having a chief vibe officer for each platform. I think that's a serious job. I think that in any social media team in 2030, you're basically going to have a tastemaker for each of the platforms specifically, who just knows what works on different platforms, because it's different on each. So
Interesting.
short answer. And so what does that mean for your PhD friends? It means that is a skill that takes time to develop if you're doing on your own. And so you want to just pick one platform, because it's very hard to become a tastemaker on 5 different platforms at once.
Interesting. I'm curious to hear how you would respond to this maybe criticism of posting on LinkedIn.
Yeah, tell me.
One of my PhD students, or one of my friends in the PhD, basically says that it feels sort of like, if you are serious about your work and you are good at researching, your work should speak for itself. And the way that you become famous is by, posting really good open source software on GitHub, and then maybe linking to it on Twitter. Now, his goal, as most of ours is to probably work at a big company or to start our own company, right? I don't think his goal is necessarily to just publish research,
Yeah.
right? So would you say to him that his thinking is a little outdated, and that it's not just about, the work you do, but also how you market it? Or I guess what would you say to this view that, if you are good at what you do, your work will speak for itself and people will find you?
I'm laughing because it's actually just a trope on LinkedIn that your work doesn't speak for itself.
Okay.
And
Yeah, say more about that.
like, it's something that if you post on LinkedIn, is very highly likely to go viral. That your work doesn't speak for itself, because that's how everyone feels. But to answer the question specifically, I'm sure there are instances where posting great open source code on GitHub and then posting it on Twitter does help you get noticed. The reality is that you still need to capture attention. And even if you have something really interesting, how do you get people to know about it? Because if you're only just leaving it on, you're just publishing it on GitHub, the only way people will find it is if they are already interested in that repo and they get curious and look at your PRs, basically.
Yeah, I guess it depends, I guess, where maybe you think your demand gen is going to come from.
Yeah.
Because I think GitHub's great as a place where you can put code, and then if someone needs that functionality, if you have the right search terms within your README, they'll probably find it. And they're actually highly motivated to do so, because if your project is going to save them however many hours or days of time, weeks, months, then it's like, they're going to find it if it's there. But I guess in these spaces that are a little bit more competitive, like, there is already a solution for something. Like, when Apache came out with Arrow instead of Parquet, they're like both these kind of column data set manipulation tools. One's faster under certain regimes, the other slower. But for the most part, people only thought to search for the other one because they already had established a name for themselves, and trying to disrupt that open source project feels like, actually, in that case, maybe that's a perfect case, because it took the Apache project really putting their name ID behind that for it to reach adoption, actually, like, reach mainstream. I'm wondering if you think there's some, like, dynamic maybe in social media for these engineers, both on that lens of, like, you're trying to get ahead of the snowball before like really starting to ferment, but also maybe some element of it too, which is if you don't have any followers already on social media,
Yeah.
the chances that you're going to have algorithmic propagation are like minute small.
Yeah.
Versus if you have at least like a core base of support systems, then you publish something that otherwise would pop off.
Yeah.
They will help that snowball into way more people saying it.
Yes. That is definitely true. I also think what immediately came up as you were mentioning that example was you can post content making the other framework the enemy. And so for every piece of open source software that's published, there's some pain point that maybe that engineer experienced. And so they're like, okay, I want to solve that pain point. Like by posting about that pain and then naturally linking out to the actual repo, more people are going to be aware, become aware of whatever their solution is. I think that just really speaks to like talking about pain is a great way to grow a following. And particularly if it's relatable pain for other people, because that's how people think. People are just thinking in their own worlds, thinking about their own pain. They're not thinking about other people's solutions.
Totally. And I think that's actually a great case where you typically don't think about that pain until you're so far down the road of already integrating something that often we just tolerate the pain.
Yeah.
But if you socialize the pain
Yeah.
collectively ahead of time so that people know that your solution won't result in them hitting that pain eventually, that's like a really powerful thing to be in the market.
And then I also think something you mentioned is like, how do you propagate over a network? And the reality is that at the start, it's like, it's really brutal. Like, it's just really sucks on whatever platform that you're working on. And there's a few different ways you can do that on various platforms. Like on Twitter, there's basically becoming a reply guy and commenting on tons of people's stuff and getting comments that get upvoted a ton, whilst also just talking about the same problems over and over again and really like turning up the stress factor in your hooks so that people are like, I feel this pain, or I need to click see more, and just really like leaning into that. But yeah, I mean, at the start, it's just brutal. It's just brutal. And particularly if it's your first platform, like I'm now doing some content on short form video, having not really done it before. And, you know, my videos get 300 to 600 views, but like there's one going out every single day. And you just have to then at the end of the month go like, okay, well, what worked, what didn't work, that is brand aligned. And what worked that and didn't work that is brand aligned, and how do you do more of it? And there's just that process of like volume. Okay, what is the top 5%? What does that have in common? Do more, and just do that cycle over and over and over again, and just consistency and iteration. It's really the formula.
But to push back a little bit on that, Will, I'm curious how you would respond to this, because it does feel like, you know, putting yourself out there does require not just a lot of time, but also just mental energy.
It does, yeah.
It's so exhausting to put something out there and then, you know, keep checking X and have like one like from your mail.
It's like that meme, like the screenshot of the 2 notifications, and then people being like, "This really matters to small accounts like ours." You guys ever see?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
No, but it just kind of feels like if you're an engineer,
sad.
you know, if you're an engineer, you kind of have this trade-off of like, okay, well, should I be sad and post something on LinkedIn that gets no likes? Or should I just go back to coding because then I'm at least productive and I can feel okay about myself? And I think a lot of people would choose the latter, right? If you give them the option. It really requires like this like crazy iron will determination to say, I'm going to do both of those things. I'm both going to do the code, and then I'm also going to spend, you know, enough time in the day that I can get my name out there and what I'm working on. And frankly, I think that's why a lot of engineers, you know, silo themselves and don't post on LinkedIn or Twitter. So I guess, you know, if you're someone like, let's say you're someone like me, okay, and you have like 100 followers on Twitter.
Yeah.
And you
100 very well respected, well-adored followers.
Yeah.
But, you know, not 400,000, right? 100. We start with a modest amount of 100. What would you do? You know, because you know, there's limited time in the day and there's limited energy.
Yeah.
How would you balance these two things?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is what you just described is the process of starting anything new. And so that is just a learning curve if you want to learn to tap dance or anything else in your life. Maybe it's learn to play paddle, whatever it is. It's just that this one feels very public and that stresses people out more. So that is just a skill that is a feeling that one has to get comfortable with, whatever you do, if you want to do anything entrepreneurial, because for the vast majority of the journey, you are just fucking shit up all the time. And that is putting posts out there, that is a bug, that is like whatever it is, because like coding in isolation feels great. Coding when you have customers who are being like, this doesn't work, like it's the same thing. Like, so yes, if you want to go put yourself in a silo where you're just coding and no one's using it, then yeah, you are safe from feeling those feelings. But if you want to put stuff into production, like you're going to feel the same things. It's just a different way.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
I don't know. What do you think of that as a response?
No, but like, what do you think is step one then for me?
Yeah.
Should I be posting more on Twitter? Should I be posting more on LinkedIn? Should I be working on my personal website? Is there some other hot take? Like, is YouTube an interesting new hot take that I should be exploring? You know, like what advice would you give someone who's very technical?
If your goal is to have your technical research seen, I think probably the best place to do that is Twitter. But you will know better. You will know better where your target audience hang out than I will, just because you are often one of those people.
Do you think it's better to go on that? It's better to choose a platform that people are hanging out on because they enjoy it fundamentally, or choosing a platform where you could actually break out of the signal noise ratio because most people aren't there?
That's a good question.
Just to spend some time
Yeah.
on it, like as a binary function, if they're not on there at all,
Yeah.
then you obviously shouldn't post there. But on this balance of there's so many researchers on Twitter, is there maybe a hot take to go to LinkedIn and say, well, we know these people have CVs, like they have jobs somewhere. We're actually just going to post there because we know that no other researcher is.
Yeah. I think it's not a bad take. I think it's actually not a bad take because, you're looking for one of the things that is really helpful to find is attention arbitrage opportunities, where basically there are more eyeballs than there is content relatively to serve it. And all that means is the relative ratio has to be good. So if you go onto LinkedIn and there is no one posting anything, but you know that some of your people hang out there or spend some time there, then that's definitely a hypothesis worth testing. But you just have to make sure, like, think about, okay, what do they get out of this? Like, and that every post has to have a point. So like, it can't just be things that are interesting. Like, how can someone use this? And then in your case, I would probably be doing a bit more like AI explaining. And you take some of the topics that perform well on X and then put them on LinkedIn, but making them maybe more approachable for a broader audience. So the technical people, the super technical people can see it and be like, this is a good take. But then someone who's not technical can also read it and be like, I understand.
Yeah, good to genius.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Like, for example, for example, I'm having to write more about AI infrastructure right now. And what I'm doing is I am making posts and then I am simplifying out every single buzzword, like CUDA or what was the other one? SRAM and all this kind of stuff. I'm just removing so that anyone can understand the point that I'm making about GPU inefficiency, but it's still making the same point.
Without getting lost.
Without using jargon.
Yeah.
Are you using Gen AI tools to help you with this like simplification process or like to structure the tone at all?
Yeah, of course. I write everything. I spend so much time using AI every single day.
Okay. So I guess that kind of segues me into my next question, which is how do you use these Gen AI tools without, just sounding like Gen AI? Like how do you rather than replacing your, your tone,
Yeah.
amplifying your natural way of speaking. Like what's the trick there? Because so easy you can start sounding like Claude or Chat.
Yeah. There's a few things you can do. I mean, a very simple one is you have a list of banned words. So you just have a list of words that you will never include in your post, like game changer or or
I am a large language model.
yeah, exactly. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is, and you can use tools like, which I don't actually, but what is it? Zero GPT? GPT Zero? There's a tool you can use to check how much of it sounds like it's written by AI. Because really, all you care about is the perception by someone else that this was written by AI. It doesn't really matter if it's written by AI. The second thing I would say is that you want to include your personal experience in the text. So you want to lead with a hook like, I spent 10 hours dealing with technical problem. Here's the solution you can implement in 5 minutes. And when someone reads that, they automatically go, oh, this is Richard's experience. It's not talking from a third person perspective, because I think that's where people are getting worn out, is they're seeing 5 top tips on building your first AI agent, and they roll their eyes a bit because they're thinking, okay, well, I've seen a million of these before. So grounding in your experience is where I would lean, and then also having a list of words that you just don't use.
I feel like just giving people a list does nothing to increase your own legitimate build rapport. Where if you literally just want to deliver those tips to people's inbox, then like, great, absolutely go for it, I guess. But if you're trying to become known as Will knows about content or Richard knows about AI, then I feel like that actually doesn't serve your goals either, because people will maybe give you a follow, but at the end of the day, if you're trying to use platforms for some end objective in the sales realm, it only matters if they recognize your name enough to be able to pick up your email or pick up your DM when you want to reach out to them to do something, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to matter. They might like your tips, but if they actually like you, then that almost kind of doesn't matter, right?
And you touch on something really important, which is how much influence am I getting over people by delivering quality content? Like, and what is it that makes someone like you decide, I'm going to listen to what this person has to say on a buying decision? And often it is, this person has given me so much useful stuff before that has proven right, and I've implemented, that I will now, because they're now telling me to spend money doing this thing, I trust them that if I spend this money, it is a highly de-risked investment of money.
It's like you're almost trading that influence for actual money. It's like
yes,
it's like tokens that people give you,
exactly,
influence tokens that they give you that you can then trade in for real money at some point if you ever want to start a business. Those tokens are then worth actual money because those people will come back to you and buy your thing.
Yeah.
Don't people call this something like credibility? Seriously though, like the act of banking is like literally a metaphor for you like putting kind of currency in the bank.
Yeah, the attention economy, right? All these,
Well, think about maybe the counter framing of this is the like dance videos on TikTok. Like, those people get millions of views, but who do they drive to buy things? Because
so you're not going to start dancing anytime soon, Will?
Not in public.
Only for TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. Only for TikTok.
We had an episode a couple weeks ago about AI in the classroom. Richard went back home and talked to one of his profs who was trying to figure out what's the best way to integrate these Gen AI tools within the classroom. And
like in high school.
Yeah, it was a pretty good discussion. And I mean, first off, this guy like really didn't know. I think there's like a big question kind of within this academic world, but I think for content creation, there's a question in my mind a little bit, just developing a tone of voice for yourself that's unique to other people. Like, I'm thinking at this point, if J.K. Rowling wanted to write another book and wanted to highly leverage AI to do it, she could probably just put in all her past works, give the AI some prompt and say, hey, generate me the next book. And it would probably actually do a pretty good job, right? Because there's like so much source material. Her pacing was like pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Actually, like reread these books pretty recently, and it didn't feel like she evolved or changed significantly as a writer from book 1 to 7. It was like, no, she kind of had her tone of voice. She was like sticking to it throughout the course of the whole series. And if she wanted to go from like, N to like N+1, it probably wouldn't be that hard for an AI to replicate that. Like, how do you think on balance, both it's just for trying to like get into content creation, but also maybe more broadly, like, do you think it's actually important to say, I'm going to use no Gen AI for my first 20 LinkedIn posts to figure out what I sound like and what I want to sound like, and only then try to get an AI to be almost like a ghostwriter and just help you emulate your tone of voice? Like, do you think that there's any value, like people actually give a shit about you having a tone of voice versus someone else? Or is that just wasted time?
I think that you can use AI to help you come up with your draft, but you have to care about what it sounds like. And the easiest thing I think for people to do is look at it and go, does this sound like me talking? And try and push it so it sounds how you would speak, maybe speak on stage, but still like how you would speak. That's generally my best suggestion there. But I don't think that means that you can't use AI tools. I just think it means that you can't just create a post with ChatGPT and be like, yep, that's done.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to give a shit and be like, no, actually, I wouldn't say that word. I would say a different word. Maybe the pace again, maybe the pacing is different. But you just have to care. And I think that's where people just use AI tools and they go, yeah, post done. Great. And that is rarely going to stand out.
Read your posts out loud.
Yes.
Sounds like you.
Yes, I do that. I do that a lot with my newsletter, actually. And I do that with my posts as well. I tend to vary my post style. I have a very like short, punchy post style. And then I also have a few more wandering sentences that are how I talk as well. So it's a mix. Because in real life, I do use some very punchy short language and then some longer floundering sentences.
Well, okay. So here's a hypothetical though for you, Will. Let's say that you had $1 trillion and you went to, Sam Altman.
Yeah.
And you said, hey, Sam, here's $1 trillion. I want you to build me X tool to help me build my personal brand.
Right.
What would that tool be that you would love to see, come into the world in the next like 5 or 10 years that would radicalize how you think people build their personal brands, if at all? Maybe there isn't a tool that we still need. Maybe we're good here where we currently are.
And you can't say what?
I can't say what.
You can't, yeah.
Okay.
Well, you can.
I mean, obviously that's what we're trying to build with say what. But I think that maybe breaking down what are people very bad at when it comes to building their personal brand. They are very bad at identifying stories from their lives that would make interesting content. They are very bad at identifying what to double down on. So it's like idea generation, and then they don't know when something works. I've had conversations with people where they're like, nothing's working, and I'll look at their data and I'll be like, well, actually you had one outlier each week for the last full week that performed 5 to 10x better than all the others, and you should be doing more of those. Like specifically picking apart hypotheses from those posts that you can then lean into again. And it's that process of picking ideas and then identifying what's working, forming hypotheses on why that worked on that platform, and then doing more of that. That is really the process.
It's a scientific process for personal branding.
100%.
Yeah.
It is that process, and that's what I have done with my own content.
Fascinating.
Because most people don't do anything like that. I mean, I'm not like writing down H0, H1, but
graphic
Yeah,
scatter
yeah,
plots.
yeah, yeah.
But you did do a little bit of this early in your content journey, right? Like you kind of ran an A/B test
Yeah, I would run it all the
implicitly
time.
on like what kind of content should you write about before finding your current niche.
Yeah. And I think that's because I was still figuring out like what I had no idea. I was at such like a transient period then. I didn't know what I was building next. Um, I'd say most people are not typically at a point in time like that in their journey. Often they have a clearer idea of what they want to be known for than I did. In which case, you just need to find what are the right aspects of that other people care about. And yeah, and then as soon as you have something that works, you just like hammer it to death. Like you just hammer it to death because it's a game of outliers. When we looked at, say, what user data for the median creator, it was the 93-20 rule, not the 80-20 rule. 93% of their views came from their top 20% of posts. So what does that mean? It means that you are going to be miserable most of the time you're posting content because 80% of your content underperforms your average by a country mile. So you're going to be sad
Most of the
time. And it's a game of outliers. And all that matters is finding those outliers. So then we go back to, okay, what are my contrarian points of view? Well, that's probably what's going to be in the outliers.
really sexy pitch for getting into content, by the way. So you're gonna be depressed most of the time.
It's really
But then
hard.
the dopamine hits that you.
Yeah. They juice me up, baby. But it is. That's why some people give up, because it is just incredibly nonlinear. And when you come from a corporate environment, you are rewarded in a very linear way. When you're from school, you're rewarded in a very linear way. And that's not how content works. So you're just thinking, I must be bad at this, rather than I'm actually learning right now. And I'm just not seeing the rewards yet.
I feel like a lot of people struggle too in their content being overly self-promotional from
Yeah.
day one, because obviously, again, that's kind of the end goal. Like, it feels like right now we're focused kind of on this like social selling framing
Yeah.
of doing content generation. So if we dive deeper into that, people just hate sales shit.
Yeah.
You know, like I think you were saying some stat before we hopped on it. Cold open rates on emails are down what, like 40%?
Yeah, 40% since 2020.
Unbelievable. So like no one's
Oh, wow.
opening emails that come into your inbox if you don't recognize the name already.
Yeah.
It feels like people are going to do the same thing on social media. Like if they see someone who's just overly pushing their product and
Yeah.
like, you know, self-aggrandizing, then that won't work. Ironic to me a little bit that you both have that and you have things like, you know, QVC or like whatnot that are just sales platforms and like people tune in those all the same.
Yeah.
But like, is there some golden ratio for like, I need to write 5 posts for every 1 post that I actually try to sell my thing on? Do
Yeah.
you try to really front load that and just have 3 months worth of posts that are
Yeah.
fully non-promotional and then start leaning a lot? Like,
Yeah.
how do you think about that ratio when we know our goal is to either spread our open source project or to sell some physical product, but we need to then manufacture other content that connects to those same people, but doesn't do that before we have the trust capital to sell.
Yeah. Yeah. So both points you make are true, which is that it's always good to front load in value. So doing 3 months of content that actually helps people solve their problems. And then there is a ratio, which is 1 to 3. 1 post actually selling to 3 delivering value. And then typically and that's the same for social media algorithms, like 3 organic posts to 1 ad is the ratio that no platform will slip below. And when all the social media platforms are starting out, it's like 100 to 1 piece of organic content for you see an ad. And that's what TikTok did. They just went absolutely ham on organic, and then they slowly introduced ads, and LinkedIn's doing now as well. So yeah, short answer is lots of value up front, and you want to do at least 3 posts delivering value before you do 1 that is asking. The one caveat I'd make that's quite important is selling is a continuum. So I put a link to a lead magnet or my newsletter in every single post. And I'm bringing people into my funnel with that. Like, they're hearing more from me regularly if they decide to sign up, if they decide to stay. They're not paying with money, but they're paying with accepting my email in their inbox. Or, and so, like, and if they like those emails and they start reading consistently, they're more likely to become a buyer of something at some point in the future. So that is fine to go in your normal posts. But if you're like, hey, buy from me, like, you need people to actually look, like, think about the psychology. The psychology is people need to go, oh, Richard is selling me something today. I've enjoyed so much of his content over the last 3 months that, hey, I'll just have a read anyway. Like, that's really what you need people to think. And if they don't trust you or they don't like the other stuff, then they're not going to read the promotional stuff.
Interesting. Here's kind of a meta question for you, Will. How much of this advice do you think is US specific? Because I know, having lived now here in Europe for 4 years, people's entrepreneurial spirit, if you want to call that, feels a little different than in the Bay Area. And to me, it feels like a lot of folks, even in London, even in a big city like London, have maybe a little bit more hesitancy or feel a little bit more shame when selling themselves. Whereas, folks in the Bay Area have a little bit more, I don't know what you could call it, maybe chutzpah, or just a real, like a je ne sais quoi, where they're like, whatever, I don't care what people think. I'm going to do my thing, and screw yourself if you don't like me. I don't really care, So how much of all of this, what we've been talking about today, do you think is US specific versus, is applicable to folks that, live in the UK or in Europe, or more broadly?
So my biggest mentor in content lives in London and has 2.5 million followers. And yeah, he's not the most salesy guy in the world. He's very focused on delivering. He's not the most salesy guy in the world in his content. He is very focused on delivering lots of value, but he's posting every day, and he is really focused on bringing people into his newsletter and into his funnel and playing the content game. So I think it's hard to talk about it in the abstract. I think if there were some specific examples, it might be easier to ground it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying comes from this sense that I get that folks in Europe, and this is, overgeneralized by a mile, but folks in Europe have this mindset of, why should I do something? Like, why is it me? I'm just, little old Timmy from XYZ village, right? And I hear this very frequently from some of the smartest people I know. They'll say, oh, why me? Like, this is, building startups is for someone in Silicon Valley, or it's for some famous rich person.
Yeah.
That's not me, right? And if that's your mindset, then I mean, I'm going to guess you're probably not going to be the type of person who wants to build a personal brand, because you don't really see the point in that, because you're never going to have anything to sell, right? And again, this is overgeneralizing, but it does feel like folks in Europe have a little bit more hesitancy when it comes to posting, just because I don't know what it is, for lack of a better word, maybe they lack the courage, or they lack the brazen sort of disregard of logic and just wanting to build something for themselves that I think Americans have a little bit more. I mean, what do you feel like that is true? Like, what is the state of entrepreneurship in your eyes between the US and the UK? Like, broadly, would you do you still feel like it's a better place to build a startup in the Bay Area, or are there, models of startups that work well for you in the UK and in Europe?
Yeah. So I think addressing the first part of the question, in Europe, it's scary to put your head above the turret. It's less common than in America. So I think people naturally feel that. Another part of that is there is an acute sense of knowledge blindness, where people have just learned so much that they have forgotten what they've learned, and they have no idea how much they can help people with their content who know less than them. As a silly example, I started posting on LinkedIn about how to prepare for a job interview. That was like one of my first viral posts. It was answering questions like, tell me about yourself, and things like that to potentially, to a lot of these listeners, sound very obvious. Or maybe not to some of them, actually. you'd be surprised at how a lot of people are not as comfortable with things that may seem basic to you. To bring this to life, I got on a call with someone who was an early, a university student who was supporting my content early on, and he was trying to help. He's trying to get a job. He's trying to get a summer internship at an investment bank, and I was explaining how to write a cold email, and he asked me, "What is the point of a cold email?" And I just thought, wow, I just thought everyone knew what the point of a cold email was.
Right.
And he just showed me that not everyone does because they haven't learned it yet. And there are a million things that both of you and all of your listeners will know that other people have not learned yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of definitionally true, right? It's
Yeah.
like you don't know what you don't know often. And once you've internalized something, it usually feels so obvious that you feel embarrassed to even mention that thing. But it's like the old you, there's probably 1,000 more of you
Yeah.
that are still there now, and just like don't know that one thing. I think maybe another question on the EU, UK, US question, because that's what we talked about.
Yeah.
Because like Richard's living it firsthand.
Yeah.
Grew up in Germany. And I feel like this like new, geopolitical situation. Like some people think of it maybe like us moving towards a dipole world where they're like these spheres of influence, or like 3+ poles, where I think like Europe is probably going to be one of those poles. At least that's, kind of long been like my thesis. But the counterpoint is I know so many talented entrepreneurs that come from Europe and are now living in the US. And some who are pretty aggressive and like loud online and saying, I never could do what I'm doing now back home. Like I came here for a reason. I came here because there's way less bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Even starting a company, like getting an LLC and a corporation in Germany would take half my paycheck. Like it's not worth it for so many people structurally. And I feel like you're a unique case because you've really put down roots and you went to school here and you know a lot of people and yada, yada, yada. But I think like maybe content aside, like, do you think that there is that trend is abating and like people that who are entrepreneurs, maybe doing content, maybe doing other things, are staying in Europe now? Do they still want to move to somewhere else? It's a little bit more hospitable to entrepreneurship if they can. Like, how do you kind of see that playing out maybe within the next like 5 years? Not like 50, but like next 5.
Europe is in general a very pessimistic place right now. Like, I don't know what it's like, Richard, when you talk to your friends in the UK and like, how's the outlook? What's the vibe?
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you. I mean, I think Europe right now is, in some sense, trying to catch up, right? I think it's country specific. Like, I think in France, if you look at AI, has, punched above its weight. Obviously, Hugging Face, Mistral, right? I mean, there's big companies coming out of France, Germany, Italy, the UK to a certain extent. All somehow feel like they're lagging behind a little bit, especially if you consider, their GDP broadly and how many smart people and how many good schools there are in these countries. So I think there's a little bit of collective head scratching around why have we not been able to innovate as fast as maybe, some of the statistics would suggest that we should be innovating. And combine that maybe with the sense that the world is so unstable right now and that there's other things to focus on. I think there's a lot of confusion is what I would say. There's a lot of confusion around what should we be focusing on. There's so many wars going on simultaneously. There's, environmental problems. There's, like domestic political issues. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of confusion is what I would say. I think folks have some sense of hope insofar as, there are really smart academics in all of these places and there is good work coming out of labs, but it feels like we haven't been able here in Europe to collectively channel all that energy as effectively as the US has into a private sector, right? Into building companies and developing new technologies.
And it's a really complicated question and problem space.
But you took PPE, so you seem like the guy who knows that. No.
That's what all the prime ministers did in the UK. But yeah, I mean, there's a attitude thing, like the pessimism. Like if you are not optimistic about the future, you're less motivated. Like on average, I would say. And
Yeah.
I don't mean to generalize there, but like that is part of what makes America special is that you go around like Silicon Valley right now and you ask people, are you optimistic? Most people will be like, yeah, I'm optimistic about what's going on. And like that matters. The second thing is that it's just not as culturally normal to start companies and to innovate in UK. There's a huge brain drain, I do speak for the UK specifically, of smart people going to finance. Like that doesn't add a ton of, economic value to the economy relatively to starting businesses that could potentially grow GDP more. And so there's not a push towards those to innovation. It's not acceptable to be rich. That's also a problem. Like you can't, it's in the US, if you've made lots of money, people are often like, yeah, like good job, pat on the back. I want to do that too. That's not really the
Or
case.
like that little kid meme, the like, happy for you.
Yeah.
Just mugging it. But yeah, like begrudging respect rather.
There's
It's
respect.
like, I wish I could have not, or like,
Yeah.
blah, blah,
Or
blah.
this motivates me to try harder.
Yeah.
Whereas in the UK and a lot of continental Europe, it's not like that. Like I have a couple friends in Germany who sold their business and made a lot of money, and they wanted to buy sports cars. They bought those sports cars and they parked them in a garage in the countryside, like away from anyone they know, for fear of people seeing their Ferraris. Like, it's fucking insane. But that speaks to the cultural undertones of like it's not acceptable to have the rewards of being daring.
Or they're just embarrassed that they bought Ferraris instead of buying Mercedes,
Of
which-
course, yeah.
naturally.
like a
Naturally.
local German car.
Like
Yeah,
like a
more-
good
yeah.
a good German, yeah.
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 Well, I mean, one thing, maybe to wrap us up for this section, it's interesting to me that you're both working, like you're starting a company and then you're posting content that both kind of overlap in this like LinkedIn specific niche. And I guess there's one framing, which is like, you're kind of giving away your secrets, like you on the podcast, you and your content. Do you ever feel like that is true or think about that? And recognize like, wow, there are going to be, so many more people that are competing for this limited attention.
Yeah.
Like the arbitrage is not going to be there anymore. And like, is that a risk that you hear from other people or that you think would like hold people back from sharing in this kind of detail? Because I think it's great.
Yeah.
I just feel like, there are obvious concerns kind of about like IP that people have when they think about things like this.
Yeah. I would say that people generally overemphasize how valuable knowing their IP is and underemphasize how hard it is to implement their IP. I shout things on LinkedIn all the time that if people actually implement it, they would do a lot better. And they just don't. Because there's just a big gap in the same way that like when I listen to a podcast, there might be 10 or 12 things to do from it, and I may do one of them. So I think you have to shout about things really a lot for people to actually change their behavior. And I am now at a point with my brand where I don't really worry about it because I have a good number of supporters who want to just hear what I have to say. And they've been around for long enough that they'll just give me the benefit of the doubt. But yes, there was a period early in my journey when I was just starting Say What, where I basically, when I was doing all these user discovery calls, I spoke to tons of creators. And in that discovery call, I told them what was working. And they all did it. And then my content stopped performing as well. So yes, there are elements of that, but I'm beyond the point of caring now.
Yeah. No risk reward.
Yeah. And I just think the value of giving it is more than the value I get, keeping it closed off. Yeah.
imagine that's true. It's like, better to be known as the
Makes sense.
sensei
Yeah.
who gave away their teachings than like someone who really kept it close.
Yeah.
Because then you're still sensei. Like even if, the student becomes the master,
Yeah.
you're still the sensei.
And your brand is your secret sauce. I mean, no one can be Will, right?
Yeah.
No one can wear this green sweatshirt, let me tell you.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. My green sweatshirt.
Should we do a rapid fire round?
Yeah, let's do our inaugural rapid fire round.
Okay. We have questions. Respond in a sentence or less. Will. They
Okay.
should, they're just fun. Twitter versus Instagram.
Twitter.
Claude versus OpenAI.
Claude, but it's getting closer now with G5.
Okay, that's interesting. Maybe we'll double click on it later. Rugby versus football.
Rugby.
Favorite/least favorite British food.
Favorite? Roast dinner. Least favorite? Most other British food.
Richard, can you confirm?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Okay. Thing you miss most about the UK.
My mom.
That's sweet.
Aw.
Favorite coffee shop in SF.
St. Frank.
Secret spot in
Ooh.
SF. It could be the same.
Oh, this one's hard. Secret spot. My life is so boring.
He doesn't want to give it away.
All I do is work. There's nothing secret. What is my secret spot in SF? My new co-working space, Avant Space.
Nice.
Oh.
They're not a sponsor, but they should be. Favorite TV show.
I like The Diplomat recently.
Ooh, I like that. I've heard of that. I haven't actually
Good
seen
answer. Good answer. I started watching it.
It's
really good.
really good. It's one of the few things that my wife likes that I also like, and most of her TV I don't find very restorative. And that's the only reason I watch TV.
That's worth its weight in gold. When you can find the overlap,
It's really hard.
It's really hard.
It's really hard.
And it's always so nice when they have like 6 seasons already released because then
Oh,
you know,
God,
okay,
yeah, that-
great.
Diplomat does
Pull
not.
from the queue.
Diplomat does not. Only 14 episodes, and now we're already done. So
Well, once cashed, I'm sure they'll be happy anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll find something else. Sweet. Well, thanks. For
yeah,
stopping by.
this was
so
fun.
much,
Yeah, this
man.
was,
Really
so much fun. My
that's
first
so-
video podcast.
Ours
Oh,
too.
incredible. Ours too. Well, thanks for going through this little experiment with us. We really
Of course.
appreciate it.
Yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah, agreed. I feel stronger coming out the other end that I entered in. So maybe we'll do another one soon.
Yeah. See you, everyone.
All right. Well,